I audited 5 pest control companies that found 5 different issues that all led to the same outcome: growth stalling once things started to get bigger. Hey guys, I'm Jonas, Olson, the founder of Pest. I've been in the service industry for 17 years, and over the last 5 years, we've grown a pest control company from 1 location to 17 locations across 5 states. I use this channel to document how I think about building service businesses and what's actually working for us. I wish that my mentors would have documented their journey, so I'm documenting mine for you. So as you guys know, I end up having a lot of conversations with pest control owners or service business owners in general. Most of the time it starts out pretty normal. We're just gonna talk about things that are going on and what's feeling heavier than it should. And a lot of those conversations honestly just start out with what's keeping them up at night. They're busy, revenue's coming in usually, but something just feels off. And at some point we pull up their CRM, we pull up the numbers, and that's usually when the conversation starts to change. Things slow down and people start talking as much, and it kind of just gets a little quiet. That's normally where the real issues kind of like starts to reveal themselves. And what surprised me over time wasn't really bad decisions, it was just how often completely different companies ended up in very similar situations. So I'm gonna walk you through 5 companies that I've looked at closely. These are all anonymous. They're all run by people who love their business, they love what they're doing, and none of these businesses are disasters by any means. They're just built in ways that make growth harder than it needs to be. All right, so let's look at company number 1. They're obviously staying super busy. Their phones are ringing most of the day, and the calendar is usually booked out a few weeks. But when I broke down the revenue, almost every single one of their jobs was a one-time job. They had like 700 customers, and 500 of them were one-time jobs. And again, like I've talked about before on the channel, they're already paying for the ads. The leads were already coming in. But once we stepped back and looked at the math, the real issue really started to show up. They were spending the same amount of money to acquire customers than everyone else, but choosing the lowest possible outcome for each single one of them. A customer would call, they would book in for a one-time job. They paid $200 to $300. The job would get done. The customers were super happy, and that's kind of where the relationship would end. Now compare that to converting that same customer into a recurring revenue plan. Let's just say they're paying $40 to $50 a month, but that customer stays 3 to 5, 7 years. That same customer is now worth $1,500 to $2,000, even more. It's the same ad spend, getting the same amount of leads, in the same initial visit, but completely different outcomes. The issue really wasn't the one-time work was bad because it's generating really good revenue. It was just that there was no way to predict any future revenue. And every single month depended upon, almost entirely upon how many customers or new customers they could bring in. That leaves a lot of money on the table once you want a stable, predictable growth. So obviously what we had to do is fix those jobs when they're coming in to more recurring revenue than one-time jobs. A lot of it was just, twice a year or triannuals 3 times a year, like I said, spring and summer or spring, summer, fall, but they weren't reoccurring. They would just come back every year. But we want predictable revenue, so you put them on a monthly program or quarterly or bi-monthly, whatever you guys sell. It's way easier to predict revenue. You don't have to worry about the lead shutting off, about spending more money. You can just get really predictable on your revenue because you already have the client base. So what we had that person do is start calling all those old customers that he'd already sold and try to upsell them into the recurring plan. So that was company number 1. Hold up, quick pause. If you're on a pest control company or fertilization weed control company, you're not in our Facebook group, you're choosing the harder path. Every operator that's in there is skipping years of mistakes because people are actually sharing what's working right now. So stop trying to brute force your way through growth alone. Search Pest Control Millionaires on Facebook or click the link below. And now let's get back to it. All right, so the second company that we looked at, everything looked fine. They had a few technicians. They had, again, consistent work. And when we looked at the CRM, nothing really jumped out as broken. But I started asking them some questions, and this is kind of where the issue started to show up. I asked them, when a person calls in about pricing, who answers that? And they go, the owner. If there's a schedule change, they kind of looked at me and they're like, kind of went to the owner. And then I was like, well, what happens when a customer complains? Like, yeah, that goes to the owner. And it wasn't because like the team was bad. It's just that's how the company had grown over time. So every single time, an important decision ended up going to the same exact place. And obviously that didn't matter much early on, but as the volume started to increase, it actually did start to matter. Jobs didn't really stop coming in, obviously, but the business just took longer to start responding. And then the small issues started to wait a little bit longer to get resolved. pricing became inconsistent, and customers were just depending on when the owner was available to do inspections or anything like that. So as the volume increased, the decision to speed and quality kind of dropped. And again, not because anyone was doing a bad job, it's just because everything still was going through the one person. I see this happen a lot. This just creates a ceiling once the business wants to grow past them. So obviously we had to teach this owner to start delegating and start creating some SOPs for his CSRs and his employees so they can start taking some of the load off him. But I see this a lot early on in stage of business. Like the owner doesn't want to give up any responsibility, but he has to learn to start delegating. Moving on to company number 3. The company was run super well. They had really good technicians. They had clean trucks. They had a solid reputation online. They had a lot of reviews. Everything looked really good. And once I pulled out how many active customers they had against their annual revenue, it was kind of obvious right out of the gate that the average contract was just super low. And that's when the pricing just came the sole focus of that trip. The service itself was super strong. In a lot of ways, it's probably better than what their competitors were offering. When I asked them how they landed on the pricing, they answer, it's kind of like I hear all the time. There wasn't really any strategy behind it. That's just what everyone else was charging. They called around to see what everyone else was charging, but maybe they didn't know what they're doing either. The cost to acquire a customer wasn't lower than anyone else's. The labor isn't any cheaper, fuel wasn't any cheaper, and insurance definitely isn't any cheaper. And nothing was wrong operationally. The math just literally stopped mathing. The margins were super thin to start with, and any increase in cost from anywhere obviously came straight out of their profit that they already didn't have much of. Anytime that anyone wanted to get paid more, like technicians or CSRs, it squeezed everything out of the entire company. Obviously, when ad costs increase, there's like no room to absorb it. Growth to them just meant doing more volume instead of improving the economics that they already were working on. But if you guys want to go deeper into this, I actually just made an entire YouTube video breaking down how to price pest control right way, so go check that one out. So obviously we focus on raising prices on their current customers and walk them through the process of how to do that. A lot of early young entrepreneurs or people who have been in business a while, they don't like raising prices, especially the first time. But once you do it a few times, you'll get comfortable doing it. But this is exactly where I would start with that company. All right, so company number 4. This company had grown to the point where the day-to-day operations were covered, phones were getting answered, routes were obviously scheduled, and jobs were obviously being completed. But the issue just started to show up when I started asking some follow-up questions, going a little bit deeper on their service, because I saw that a few of their KPIs started to creep up. So I just started asking them some follow-up questions, like who is doing the ghost inspections? Is a manager going out, once the callbacks did increase? And the answers weren't really no when we were talking. They all knew what they had to do, but they were just kind of inconsistent. Basically meaning that sometimes it happened and then sometimes it didn't. No one really owned retention. No one really owned callbacks. No one owned service quality once the job was done. The work was getting done, obviously, but no one was responsible for improving the outcome over time as the business started to grow. And over time, again, retention started to slip a little bit. Callbacks started to increase. And when callbacks started to increase, labor costs crept up, and so that meant more activity, but the P&L obviously didn't improve with it. And so the issues, when we pulled the reports, they were showing up, they were talking about it in meetings, but they just weren't consistently getting acted upon. And again, like I said earlier, it's not that the team didn't care, it's not that they weren't competent, it's just that leadership behaviors weren't clearly assigned to specific KPIs. So obviously it was pretty simple to change. Putting KPIs were direct reports and then having them report on their every single meeting, make sure that those tasks were getting done. Pretty simple to fix, but if you just don't know, you don't know. But as you scale, you start to watch these things a bit closer. The 5th company was growing really well. They're spending money on ads. Leads were coming in. Phones were ringing like crazy. And when we looked at the P&L, nothing was really an issue. But when I started asking questions about their marketing, I said, well, which ads were driving the most recurring revenue? Which ones brought in like some of those cheaper jobs or one-time jobs that that didn't come back or harder to convert? And which campaigns produced customers that stayed a really long time? And there wasn't really a clear answer. And so marketing was just getting measured by how many leads that they were getting. So they're getting a lot of leads that looked really good, but they weren't getting measured on the outcomes of those leads. Some customers signed up super easy, like I said. Others kind of hesitated, some were just super cheap, and some actually started canceling really quickly. And so their marketing was not broken because leads were coming in. It just wasn't connected to like the lifetime value, retention, or margin. So increasing ad spend didn't improve any predictability. It just increased the volume of the leads. But without clear feedback, scaling marketing just gets expensive leads. So obviously this was pretty easy to fix, as you guys could probably tell. I just had to then break out their campaigns and start tracking their campaigns per ad and per campaign so they could really dial in on what they're looking at and see which ads were producing the best customer and doubling down on those. So when I look back at all 5 companies, the problems on paper really look different. Like I said, one had the one-time work, one had the bottleneck by the owner, the third one was underpriced, fourth one, no one was owning the KPIs, and the fifth one, the marketing was running good, but without any clear feedback. But underneath it all, they're all the same issue every single time. None of these businesses were built intentionally for scale. They're just growing by reacting to what's in front of them, not by designing how the business needed to work as it got bigger. That's why growth just tends to get hard for a little while instead of getting easier. But if you're watching this video and you're thinking, yeah, we have a little bit of all that, you're probably right. That's a mistake most owners make, and that it usually is an effort. It's fixing the symptoms instead of the constraints. So if I were you, I wouldn't try to fix all these things at once. I would just pick one, look at the numbers, ask one question. What is the one thing in my business that if I fix this one thing, it would make everything else easier? What is the one big lever that I can pull to fix everything else? And so once you get that one thing figured out, then move on to the second one, third one, fourth one, and fifth one. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.